we're live. Yeah, so we'll keep the conversation going as people trickle in, and I'll give a formal intro.
Cool.
Yeah. Let me check my volume real quick. All right, it looks like they can see us. What's up, Tony? Tony watches closely.
I'm going to send it in my Discord and everything too.
All right, I'm increasing my volume right now because it was a little low. And it should be public. Yep, it's public.
Cool.
Wait, so Jackson, I know you live in the West Coast. Colin, you're in DC. Where you live, Ricky?
New York City.
Dang, so you drove all the way to see us in DC.
I took a bus, man. I took a red eye Saturday morning, and I got there for the protest.
Not as big of a mission as Jackson, though.
No, not at all.
Yeah, California. Well, I was originally coming from Arizona because I was there at my parents' house for the holidays, so it wasn't as bad. But the trip back home, all the way to Orange County, was brutal.
I'm sharing this to Twitter right now. I'm gonna tag you guys in it.
Cool.
So at least because the stream didn't work yesterday and we're doing it today, at least we have another thing to talk about, which is that tweet.
Which tweet?
I think referring to the tweet of AOC saying that she thinks that House floor votes are important.
Oh God!
And that it pressures people.
It pressures people, can cause real political change in unexpected ways, and also it's important to show future generations that we're fighting in every way we could for the policy that we're taking a vote on.
Oh, really? Cool. Thanks, AOC.
Yeah, that's the argument we were making.
Yeah, she's trolling us now.
It's very disheartening. What's up, Anthony and Anthony Reyes, Les Bones, Nguyen Giap? Who else we got here? Dirtbag Leftist. Welcome to the live stream. So I'm joined today by Jackson Hinkle, the organizer of the Force to Vote protest. I'm also joined by other organizers, Ricky Rants and Colin. So you guys want to give yourself an introduction for the people who may not know who you are, like give a little bit of your background, kind of like an elevator talk, like you're meeting somebody on the elevator for the first time. We can start with you, Jackson.
Yeah, so I live in Orange County, California. Very, very toxic little bubble I live in here. And but it's a beautiful place. I'm thankful that I live here for a lot of reasons. But not a lot of leftists, not a lot of people fighting for Medicare for all, things like that. So I have my own YouTube channel. It's called The Dive with Jackson Hinkle. I've been involved with politics, like environmental advocacy, and like lots of local politics for a number of years. Ran for city council in my hometown, and then in February I decided to start my own YouTube show. And since then, just been covering a lot of the same stuff that actually is covered on this channel. Providing my takes as well. And helped organize the Force the Vote protest in Washington, D.C. with Colin, who's also on the call right now. And it was a really cool thing, and it was awesome to meet all of you guys there and participate in that. I think it was a historic moment.
And shout out to you for reaching 10K yesterday. Right?
Thank you.
And I'm glad to see more honest voices making it out there. So congratulations to you, Jackson. Guys, if you have not yet subscribed to Jackson's channel, please subscribe to his channel. So we also have Colin here, who if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have gotten the permit to protest in DC, like where we were. You want to give yourself an introduction for the crowd, Colin?
Yeah. So I'm Conrad Carter. I currently live in DC, the epicenter of the fuckery, as I call it. Uh, I'm originally born and raised in the UK, moved to New Jersey when I was middle school, lived in Boston since college, and moved to DC almost 3.5 years ago. Became a U.S. citizen back in 2015, and I think shortly after that was the beginning of my political awakening, since being able to vote in this country should kind of be concerned of, the people who are running our country. And, 2017, found out that progressive media actually does exist by way of TYT. I'm sure many of you can relate. And, from there, it's just a lot of learning and a lot of kind of wakening up to the craziness that exists in our government and how it's basically fucking us average people over. I discovered Jackson. I knew of Jackson since August of last year, but I didn't really follow him until last month, actually. And then I think it was your third or fourth stream when, this Force a Vote thing came about from Jimmy and Justin Jackson, when Jackson was like, you know what? I want to come to DC and protest. Mm-hmm. And I was like, sold. I'm all about that, because I think for me, I think especially last year, I think there was just something in me just wanted to just kind of rage, just as far as against the system. And I think we saw a little bit of that from the George Floyd BLM protest, but nothing really amounted to that necessarily. So I think for me, I've just been kind of waiting just a way to really get my feet on the ground instead of just talking about all these issues on Twitter, being able to do something more active about it. So I was very happy that, Jackson took the initiative, just to be direct action and, just being able to help as far as getting a permit and being a part of the protest, was amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. We're going to get into how amazing that was. We also have Ricky Rants, man. How are you doing? This is your first stream, right?
Yeah, my first stream. I'm Ricky, also known as Ricky Rants on Twitter. You can find me there. I don't really have a big background in politics necessarily. I'm more of an artist here in New York City, but I've been increasingly political over the past few years. And I've supported a lot of progressive candidates over the last few years, and I keep watching them fail us. And I got a little bit mad, a little bit angry, and I started getting more and more involved in politics over the past few years. I keep following more and more independent journalists, independent commentators, which I think is very important, and I try to encourage everyone to do. Seek out independent voices. And actually, I think my first stream of Jackson's was the one where we decided we're going to DC. I went in there like guns a-blazing because Jimmy Dore stuff was happening. I'm like, let's go to DC. Let's go to DC. And Jackson's like, all right, we got this. And he literally just organized it. So I was on board. I've been like the biggest cheerleader for that. And I'm so happy that Jackson and Colin did all this work. And I made the trip and we did it.
Yeah.
We learned a lot. So
we did learn a lot. And it was fantastic meeting like a lot of people who we've interacted with online over there. I would say that was one of the coolest things there. I want to give a shout out to Steven Torres for the super chat, who I met there. I've seen him like interact with me on Twitter. Like he defends me and I defend him. Like when we're trying to educate people on Twitter. He said thoughts on AOC using forced to vote points for impeachment. We're gonna get into that. It's kind of the blessing in disguise from yesterday, and us not being able to stream, is that we now have an opportunity to talk about that today. But let's touch a little bit more on that stream that Colin and Ricky brought up about Jackson talking about how he wants to go to DC. So let's go into the origin story of how that all started. So Jackson, how did you come up with the idea of organizing a protest in DC?
Yeah, so I mean, for those of you, I think everyone who's on the stream right now watching probably understands that like the origin story behind Force the Vote. You know, like Mark Pocan said he was going to vote for Nancy Pelosi as speaker. Jimmy Dore called him out, said like, hey, maybe you should negotiate for something before you concede and give her your vote. And, you know, it kind of like that story honestly would have faded off into oblivion if it weren't for Justin Jackson, who tweeted out at AOC and said, hey, AOC, are you voting for Pelosi? Are you going to try to withhold your vote for Pelosi? And AOC was like, probably just thought Justin Jackson, who's a running back for the LA Chargers football team, probably thought he was just some dumb football player or something, and was like trying to school him, tried to respond and be like, no, we can't push for that right now. We don't have the votes. We don't have the power, whatever. She just put out her typical BS talking points. And then it just blew up into this massive conversation online. So that's like the origin story of Force the Vote. I was inspired by that discussion. I was like, this is simple. AOC, the squad, progressives, they all campaigned on Medicare for all. They said the time to fight is now. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so let's fight. And we were in the middle of a stream, and someone was just like, damn, like I wish people would organize on the streets for this sort of stuff. I wish there was grassroots organization for this and action for this. I was like, yeah, like why don't we just go to DC and do it? Let's just do it. And then I was like, I was a bit nervous at first because I'm like, I don't have a huge following. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if we're going to even get anyone out there. Oh, we got people out there, and it was a very powerful movement. And we got some huge voices out there as well, and some absolutely like heartbreaking stories, like healthcare stories, people who came out, traveled to DC to share their stories and to fight for Medicare for all. So that's what this is about. You know, that's what this is about. And I was inspired to see so many people who were really in alignment with the movement we're building.
Hey man, you took the initiative of organizing that event, and you're a hero for that, man. Everybody who showed up over there, everybody who was supporting was also a hero. The only people who didn't act like heroes were the ones who didn't take any action at all, and were just like, or worse yet, being disingenuous about it. So Colin and Ricky, you guys were in the chat when Jackson came up with the idea of wanting to go to DC. So can you tell us like what was that like in the chat? Like how's everybody reacting when that happened?
I think for me it was, and I think I said this earlier, just being like, you know, I just have felt like this thing inside me, like really for the last year. And I think it really kind of started honestly when, you know, after the primary, when Bernie lost, and just being like, man, like just feeling very defeatist and just being like, what more can be done? And I think, you know, then George Floyd happened, and, you know, I went to the protests, a couple of protests in DC for that, you know, and I thought, okay, well, this is different, you know, like this is not the typical protest, you know, maybe this will have some legs, you know, as far as actually pushing for, you know, policy changes, I think, especially within the Black community. Not much has happened since then. And so I think I've just really felt kind of distraught, you know, all year, just as far as I want to do something, but I can't do it. And I think I just kind of related to Jackson of being like, I want to do something, but I don't want to do this by myself. I want to feel like there's other people who want to do this with me. And so I believe it was when Jackson said, you know, like, I am willing to come to DC. I think in my mind, I was like immediately like, if you do come, then I will help in whatever way you need. So I think for me, that's kind of how this began. And then, you know, obviously, you know, talking to you guys and figuring out, you know, logistics as far as permits and all of that, like, you know, I was able to kind of help kind of get that process off the ground here. And especially I was on vacation at that point, so I had more time to do it. But I think it was just kind of the perfect storm as far as hearing everything that Jimmy was saying, you know, over the past few weeks prior. And then, you know, just in my own soul, just wanting to feel like doing some type of advocacy versus like just tweeting about it. I'm watching, you know, a lot of progressive pundits, which I love, but none of them were necessarily talking about direct action. And yeah, just wanting to do something about it. And then, Jackson was about it. So it's just kind of like, yeah, I'm for it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I also did some BLM protests, and I was really hopeful that there would be sweeping change after those major protests all summer, and it was kind of disappointing, So when this opportunity came around, I felt that there was a palpable energy, and I was hoping that we could piggyback off of that energy. And I think we did a good job of that. When you're on Twitter, you see things like general strike trending all the time, but there's never a general strike, right? So you put this out there, but it never really happens. There's never any follow through. So it's really nice when you can find people that are like-minded that actually want to follow through with something, and that's what happened, and we did it.
That's what's up, man. Yeah. Just a couple shout outs. Shout out to Independent Left News. Thank you, brother. You've helped connect me and like given me advice on like how to expand my outreach. You also told me you've helped out Jackson and Richard, right? You guys know who Indie Left News is, right? Yeah. Shout out to you, man. Thank you for all the help that you do in trying to unite this movement. Shout out to Mona. She just donated a super chat. She said, my faves. Thank you all for fighting for us. I love and appreciate you guys and all you do. Franco is right. Y'all out there are the real deal. So, Jackson, did you ever feel disheartened over the backlash that some of the bigger voices were giving about forced to vote? Nomiki Kans was a prominent one who was saying that, Jimmy's not an organizer. He shouldn't be saying any of this. Or anybody else who was talking down about forced to vote in general. Did you ever feel disheartened, or did that kind of like act like fuel for you and make you want to fight harder?
No, I think Nomiki Kans is a joke, a pathetic joke, and everyone knows that she is. And I think she probably even recognizes that now because she's hemorrhaging subscribers on her YouTube channel by the thousand. And in fact, really every single channel who's opposed forced to vote, the Young Turks, Nomiki Kans, list the others. They're all losing support. And even if it doesn't look like their subscriber number is dropping, their subscriber numbers are, in some cases, like with the Young Turks, plateauing. Whereas, like over the past 10 years, it's been a steady increase in subscribers. So they're all losing support. People are pissed off, and this is the same thing we're seeing with organizations like what Ali Alexandra, who's I believe in the stream right now, has pointed out with regard to DSA. It's like, your entire membership supports this. Your entire membership wants Medicare for all. Your entire membership believes that we need to be fighting right now because 186 people are dying. Since they took that speakership vote, 1,860 people have died in the U.S. alone because of a lack of access to basic health insurance. That's almost 2,000 people. So people are pissed off, rightfully so, and I think it shows. I think it really shows. Like accounts like ours, Jimmy Dore, yours, like all of these YouTube channels, they have had such an increase not only of support but of an actual community, like an actual community of people who are working to make this happen. And Nomiki is out there just shit talking on anyone who's trying to actually fight for this. So no, it didn't concern me at all. I think it's to be expected when you have people operating within this progressive sphere that are trying to further their career within the party, seek elected office. Make sure that they don't turn off, anyone who could potentially endorse them further down the line. It's just how it works sometimes. There's always going to be people like that. But I guess, yeah, to the end of your question, it did kind of inspire me to fight harder. I did do that.
What about you guys, Ricky, Rants, and Colin? Like, did it fuel you guys with more energy to want to fight harder, or did you ever feel like a little disheartened by all the backlash?
Go ahead. Who are we, Jamal Bowman and Corey Bush over here? Jesus.
Oh yeah, that was hilarious.
I'm the kind of person. I mean, I'm in like several Facebook battles right now. with my liberal friends. So whenever someone tells me no, I literally just go stronger. So yeah, bring the backlash, bring it, because I'll sit there and I'll stand my ground and I'll fight something our politicians won't do. So yeah, I just got more fueled. I got more certain that I would be in DC as soon as people started attacking us, because they never came with an alternative plan. They never said, hey, I think what you're doing is wrong, but. There was never a but. It was, oh, you're wrong, you're horrible, you're a grifter, you're a jagoff, you're this, you're that. There's always some kind of like, smear, and it never actually resulted in anything. So yeah, I really wanted to go to DC after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, and one, I just didn't care. Mainly because I just feel like universal healthcare in this country is just a need right now. And I think especially in the midst of a pandemic. And I think for me, it was the idea of, as I said, like we have plenty of, progressive media that talks a good game as far as, oh, we need this, oh, we need that, which is right. But barely any are able to kind of say, let's do something about this. Let's challenge the system on this. Let's organize. Let's form coalitions. Let's do all of that. And I was going to say no shade to TYT, but all the shade to TYT. That's what they used to do. Prior to me kind of watching them in, 2017, this was a huge thing of their platform as far as doing that activism and protesting. So for me, it was kind of like, you guys used to do this. And because you have a problem with Jimmy, like you don't want to do it. And I just thought about this morning. I think a lot of people make the connection to, instead of policy, to cults of personality. Like just because Medicare for all is a good idea, but Bernie suggested it. So I don't like him. So I don't like the plan. Or forced to vote is a good idea, but Jimmy brought it up and I don't like him, so I don't like the idea. It's just kind of like, are you going for the person or are you going for the policy here? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what a lot of the noise was about, just those weeks prior to us doing the protest. It was just a lot of, oh, I don't like Jimmy, he sucks or whatever, he's done wrong, he's too angry, he's this and he's that. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, there's people out here dying from lack of health care. Mm-hmm. Can you put your idiotic issues aside and fight for the common good here? And so I think if anything for me, it was just kind of like, if I prefer to be on the right side of history in this case, mm-hmm. But I think it just kind of exposed, the true vision of what many of these pundits had. They're not really about, progressive policies. They're about, I think, talking about them, for their brand, but they're not necessarily going to do the work to make sure that we have the things that we deserve. So, yeah, I think for me, it was just like, I wasn't really bothered by it, but it did kind of helped the people who are really real about it and those who really aren't.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's why for me, it fueled me with energy, because I've been seeing it for a while now. Like, there's silence on Assange, unless they're pressured, and then they make like a 7-minute video about it, or less, or not at all. Their horrible takes on foreign policy, them buying into Russiagate, which was easily debunked. For months, it was debunked. Them going after Tulsi Gabbard for the wrong reasons. Like, there's ways to criticize Tulsi Gabbard, but they threw a lot of bad faith attacks, some of which were debunked already. They were just repeating mainstream media talking points. Sam Cedar, for example, just like going after Jimmy over at a ridiculous, just like video after video smearing Jimmy Dore. This was something that really revealed a lot of their true intentions, which is, they're not some of them are not genuine. Like, you were talking about the need for Medicare for all for years. Ever since Bernie Sanders came into the picture, they were convincing people about the need for progressive policies like Medicare for all. And then the moment to finally fight for it, we finally have 15 people in Congress who ran on Medicare for all. They can use that power to withhold their vote from Nancy Pelosi until she agrees to put the Medicare for all up for a vote. And they're saying it's a bad strategy. And then some of them initially were saying it's a good strategy, like Cenk Uygur. But then because people were making it about Jimmy, he changed his stance. So I took it as an opportunity to really expose who the people are that we shouldn't be listening to, and who the people are that are actually genuine about it, like this, like you guys. And when I was there, I felt a strong sense of community. I don't remember which one of you guys brought it up, but I felt like I was with family there. Like we're all fighting for something for the entire country to have, like especially during a pandemic. People are dwelling in debt. They're inundated, and then like here is an opportunity to finally get it done, and we're out there fighting for it. So do you guys want to reminisce a little bit about what we saw over there? Like, what were your favorite moments about the Forced to Vote protests?
Yeah, so I mean, I can answer that. That I have one exact moment that comes to mind for me. There was a young man by the name of Chris who was a landscaper and construction worker who made it out to our protest on the third day, which was January 4th, which was actually the day after the so-called progressives, the fraud squad, voted for Nancy Pelosi as speaker. And I didn't see him the day before or the day before that. And he walks up to me before we start the protest, and he's like, "Hi, my name's Chris." He starts telling me a story, what he does for work. Mm-hmm. He's like, "I make just above the federal poverty rate, which is like $26,000 or something like that." He's like, "I make just above that. So I don't qualify for government provided healthcare. I don't qualify for any of the government programs that could help out people who are making below the federal poverty rate." But he explained, like, I'm screwed because I make just barely above that. And then he took off his jacket. Mm-hmm. And underneath his jacket, he showed me what he was wearing. It was a yellow vest. Shout out to the yellow vest movement. He was wearing a yellow vest, and it had all of these papers taped across the vest. And I was just like, what is going on here? And then I start to see that there's Sharpie written on all the papers. Clearly it's some sort of like like an art piece. And he explains to me that all of the pieces of paper taped across his vest were his outstanding medical debt bills. They ranged from $100 to $400 to $500 to $700 to $900 to $1,200 to $1,100. There were so many of them. And these were all of his outstanding medical debt bills. Still today hasn't paid him. One in particular, the most expensive one, was I think about $1,200. He explained to us that he got that medical bill because he was working on the job as a landscape designer, and he accidentally brushed his arm up against some poison ivy, which he's very allergic to. So he rushed to an ER. The ER wouldn't treat him. They wouldn't give him care because they said that he was uninsured and they can't do that, which, mind you, is illegal, but that's how healthcare operates in this country. So he goes down the street, goes to another ER, and they treat him. Turns out he was $50 short for the copay. Couldn't pay it on the spot. He's trying to work with them. He says, I'll pay you as soon as I have money. I guess that wasn't good enough because not too long after that, after he couldn't pay that copay, he received a check or a bill in the mail for $1,200, just below $1,200. Interest, I guess. Interest on healthcare that he needed to save his life. Mm-hmm. That's healthcare in this country. It's a uniquely American problem. You'll never hear issues like this coming out of the UK or Canada or Germany or any other country. Rwanda, for example, they even have a form of a healthcare program that I think is better for the most vulnerable of their population than what we have here. And Colin, you taught me all about that. But it's disappointing. It's pathetic. It's so weak coming from the richest country on the earth. Yeah. So that's what resonated with me the most, hearing about the stories of people who are actually suffering at the hands of this murderous healthcare system. And those are the stories that people like Nomiki Cons and like the Young Turks and like the Majority Report, they don't touch that. They don't try to criticize those stories. They don't try to say, oh, you guys aren't pushing for this at the right time. They don't talk about that. They ignore that. Mm-hmm. They only like to shit on Jimmy Dore and us and the people who are out there fighting and who are like prominent voices. But for the people who are actually suffering at the hands of this, they have nothing to say, because they know if they do try to address their concerns, they're going to look like even bigger fools than they're already looking. So those are the moments that stood out most to me. Savage Joy Marie also shared a heartbreaking story.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, I'll let you guys take it.
So yeah, great segue. And Savage Joy was on Jackson's stream, I think a few days prior to us being at DC. And I heard of her story then, but I think hearing her story again in person, I think hit differently versus hearing it, on stream. But, she basically woke up one day blind, and having to, get the medical care that she needs in order for her to kind of cope with life now as a legally blind person. And she shared that she actually did speak to Rashida Tlaib and Ro Khanna and basically poured her heart out to them, basically being like, please help me, and so I think in hearing that, that Saturday, I just felt, again, the rage, just kind of well up, inside of me, because the idea that these politicians basically use our pain for their position. And now that you're in a position where you can, at minimum, push Nancy Pelosi to put Medicare for all on the floor, for Savage Joy, for people who need the help. Well, all of us need the help really right now, but I think especially the people who are most in need, and you didn't take it, So I think for me, it was just it really kind of hit home the idea of like, she had direct contact with politicians who promised her that they would help her. And as of now, they haven't done anything. And they had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to at least push the goalposts a little bit towards Medicare for All, and they didn't do it.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I remember I met a man from Atlanta. He said he drove up from Atlanta for the protest. Mm-hmm. Older man. He was actually carrying one of my signs, I think on that third day. And he turned to me and he said, I'm at risk and I came. Why aren't there more people here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I said, I don't know. Because I know a lot of people know about this. And that really resonated with me. Because we need to get more people involved. And I think a lot of people are trying. It's the toes are in the water kind of situation going on right now. I'll tell you what I learned, though, about this, from this protest. Someone had an idea. It might have been controversial, but it was an idea. It brought thousands of people together. A lot of that was online, but it was still thousands of people. There were tweet storms like crazy. People were active on social media. People called their representatives. People emailed their representatives. People tried to show up to their offices, even though they're closed, I guess. Not essential workers, ? Weird. People did protests all over the country, their own version, small protests. There was a town hall online. Over 100,000 people watched that town hall. A lot of people participated in that town hall, right? And then we went and we did 3 days of protests right outside their building. We circled their building, chanting, screaming. They knew we were there, and we were not acknowledged at all. Like, literally, progressives don't even acknowledge their constituents unless it's on a really cute Instagram Live thing. And that's the fact.
That is a fact.
They tell you, contact your representative, and then they don't listen to you. So that's what I learned.
Yeah. I want people to keep this in mind, because we're now gonna talk about, was this a success? This was organized 2 weeks before we went.
Right.
There were people from across the country that made it. There were very genuine commentators and journalists that showed up. there was a coalescence also with another movement that was fighting for press freedom, that was fighting for Julian Assange. Outside of that, there was a petition that was written, which received, maybe you guys know, how many signatures did it receive? It was like 41, it was around 41,000 signatures that signed on to Force to Vote. Jimmy Dore had at one point broke his record of how many live viewers he had when he was talking about Force to Vote, like in this town hall. Almost 20,000 people were watching. There were people that wanted to go to this protest and that couldn't make it, but they were there in spirit, and that was surely felt. And keeping also in mind that DC is a very neoliberal place. I know because I live there. Colin can attest to that too. It's a very neoliberal place. It was a success. We know now that these politicians are not actually fighting for us, and that we need to apply maximum pressure. And we know that we can organize movements. Even if it's 2 weeks in advance, we can do it. We can organize it. We have the support from across the nation. As we saw, people who wanted to be there. They wanted to be there so bad. To me, it was a success. We talked about it. We were calling out people who were making it about personalities and not about the issues. They're like, we're the ones making it about the issues. You guys are attacking a personality, and that personality, Jimmy Dore, is defending himself, and we're defending him. Because it's not about him. It's about Medicare for all. It's about how people are suffering. Like we talked about the stories here. Then there's other people that are telling their stories. There were people telling their stories during when Bernie Sanders was running his 2020 and 2016 campaign about the urgency of Medicare for all. We did what Bernie Sanders didn't do. We organized a movement and we showed up in DC. So I'll ask you guys, was it a success in your eyes?
Absolutely, to me. Again, I think you said it, Franco. I think the idea that we did this in 2 weeks' notice, less than probably 2 weeks. And so my thing is, if we were able to pull that off in 2 weeks, can you imagine what could have happened if we had more time? Mm-hmm. You know, and we're not in a pandemic right now. You know,
that as well. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, I think considering the circumstances, you know, obviously we're COVID right now. Obviously, that weekend was New Year's weekend, so a lot of people were traveling anyway, you know. But the fact that we had about 50, 60 people, you know, come, I think, across all 3 days, and we had thousands more who were supporting, you know, the effort, you know, at least in spirit, you know, like online or whatever. I think, you know, like, I think to me, it's just a testament of, again, as you said, this wasn't about Jimmy. This is about an idea. And I think, you know, thinking ahead, it's like, it kind of proved that there are people who are willing to, you know, get off their ass and do something about it, even if it's if people felt, oh, you know, like, oh, you didn't have a lot of people there, like, what is this or whatever. And those are the kind of comments, you know, that we got. But, you know, but as Ricky said, you know, people came from all over the country, you know, for those 3 days on this one issue. So I think the fact that we were able to get that on such short notice, I think is testimony of how successful it was. But I think also just how committed people were to ensure that we need healthcare, you know, and they were willing to come however far, you know, to ensure that even if they didn't need it necessarily, but they were willing to fight, you know, in the name of other people who might need it more.
I mean, action is better than inaction, right? So if you sit around complaining about something, it's not really going to get the job done. So I think taking action is always good. And I will say one thing, Fraud Squad trended organically after the vote, right? And that had a lot to do with the work that we put in and that other people were putting in on Twitter and calling the reps and keeping the conversation alive. People didn't let this conversation just fade into obscurity. People kept it alive, and Fraud Squad trended. That was not a tweet storm. That was not a plan. We did not know that was going to trend on Twitter. It just kind of happened organically because a lot of people were very disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I kind of second a lot of what you guys both just said, but I also have to recognize we have to acknowledge that, like, force the vote, it doesn't just end there. It's a continued movement and pressure campaign. I mean, they're going to be introducing a Medicare for All piece of legislation in the House and in the Senate in February. They do this like every session of Congress. So if anyone thinks that we're not going to be continuing the pressure in February, then you got to be tripping, because we are. Now, was the DC action a success? I think there's different metrics of success. Obviously, it was a complete and utter failure with regards to actually getting these members of the Fraud Squad to vote for or to withhold their vote for Pelosi, to force a vote on Medicare for All. Failure there. There's no sugarcoating that. And I feel like a lot of times on the left, we do sugarcoat things where, like, you know, Bernie's campaign was a success. He didn't make it past the primary, but it was a success for these reasons. And it's like, okay, if you're going to say it's a success for these reasons, you also have to acknowledge how it was a failure in other ways, and probably the biggest way of all. So yeah, there were successes. As Ricky pointed out, like, Fraud Squad organically was trending on Twitter. There wasn't like a massive, like, Twitter organized campaign for that. It just happened in the face of their actions, right? Like, I guess it wasn't entirely organic. They manufactured that response by voting for Pelosi without trying to get anything in return. We had an incredible group of people who showed up to the DC protests. We had, in addition to some of the speakers I just mentioned who shared their heartbreaking stories, who traveled out there in the middle of a pandemic when they themselves already don't have a lot of money to travel. They did that. We had people like Nico House. We had Fiorella Isabel. We had Craig Pasta Jardula. We had Brianna Joy Gray. We had, like, Nick Brana, Lee Camp. We had an incredible group of prominent leftist voices who came out and coalesced for this movement. We also were able to unite with the Action for Assange crew in DC and participate in their actions, and they came to our actions, which was beautiful. We increased public discussion about this and debate about this, about forcing a vote on Medicare for All. So was it a total failure or a total success? No. I mean, you have to look at, there's different metrics of success, I guess, and we have to recognize that, or these movements are always going to be destined for failure.
Yeah. So thank you, Sober Good, who just donated. He said, "I give to Dor, and he's got too much ego. Here is my meager income." Thank you for the super chat. Yeah, it's definitely an eye opener for people. I think people are gonna start relying more on public pressure, because before, and I was guilty of this too, around 2016, even a little bit in 2020, I was more so hopeful of politicians doing the work for us than actually, like, organizing and going on the ground. I started doing that more in 2020. So I think this is an eye opener for people to want to organize more. And it starts also, like, online, and then we actually build on that on the ground. So what do you guys think is the next step now for Force the Vote? Like, Jackson, you said that we're going to continue this on to February. What are some plans that we have going forward?
Yeah, I can take that one off the bat. Well, just what you pointed out, what I just talked about, it's like, okay, all of these Fraud Squad members and the 100+ members of the House who say you support Medicare for All, apparently January 3rd wasn't the right time. We heard them loud and clear. They kept telling us, now's not the time, now's not the time, now's not the time. So maybe come February, when a few thousand more people have died due to a lack of access to basic health insurance, maybe then will be the time. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll await to hear from them. But either way, we're going to be continuing the pressure in February when they reintroduce the Medicare for All piece of legislation. I don't know who's going to be introducing it in the House. I do know Bernie's going to be reintroducing it in the Senate. So if they're going to be reintroducing it in February, I would assume that they're not just introducing it for shits and giggles, that they actually want a vote on this, right? I mean, that's like basic logic, right? If you're going to introduce a piece of legislation, wouldn't you want a vote on it? Wouldn't you want it to potentially succeed in passing? So, I mean, hopefully we get a bit more support in February when we actually push for this then. Mm-hmm. I don't have exact action steps yet as to how you can get involved in that movement. But if you follow any of us, we're all going to keep you updated. But that organizing is kind of going on right now, and we're trying to figure out the best strategy insofar as pushing for a vote on that once it's introduced. So you guys can all stay up to date on that. If you're in the Slack for Force the Vote, you can find updates there as well.
I think one thing that we definitely have to kind of work on, I think collectively within this movement is, controlling the narrative. Because right now, the media controls the narrative of Medicare for All. And what I mean by that is, we have Big Pharma, we have all these healthcare corporations that, due to their profits, do not want Medicare for All. Mm-hmm. So they're basically holding the media hostage as far as, they don't want anything in relation to Medicare for All to become mainstream. The sad thing is, I think, unfortunately for them, it is becoming more mainstream. So I think really the question is, how can we break through that gate as far as, ensuring that our mainstream media is able to kind of talk about it in a way that is not a right-wing talking point. And I was kind of sharing this a little bit last night with you guys before, when we didn't figure out the stream. Mm-hmm. But I was reminded this weekend, actually, of what Jon Stewart did in connection to the 9/11 responders, that he advocated for them, to ensure that their healthcare got taken care of. And we need people like that who have that influence and, the pull to kind of bring the media onto our side, essentially, and to make it known to our politicians that this is what we need. This is something that 80% of your base has asked for. This is something that 70% of the country is asking for. So I think part one, is having to break through the media as far as, having an inside-outside game, as far as people who are within that system who are able to advocate for us properly, because we now know that Squad is not necessarily going to do that. Then the other thing I think we also have to do is control our stories, because people can knock healthcare for Medicare for All all day long, but they can't discount Savage Joy's story. Mm-hmm. They can't discount Chris's story. They can't discount all the people that we heard, on the ground and in the country who are having issues in regards to medical care. That you can't discount, the stories that we hear. And Brianna Joy Gray did kind of talk about this at the event when I was speaking to her briefly. She had the idea of, what would happen if someone just recorded her constituents in New York and shared their story in regards to medical care, and being like, AOC, you promised you would fight for us on this. And 2 years later, I'm still dealing with this. What happened? I think we have to continue to force our politicians to be accountable of the things that they promise. And as I was sharing, I think with Jackson last night, shaming them, I'm not opposed to shaming people if it means getting what I want. And I think we're in a position now where we have to continue shaming our politicians. Again, I have to go back to Savage Joy. The fact that Rashida Tlaib and Ro Khanna, basically, heard her and kind of did that, oh, I get it, I understand you, I feel your pain and all that kind of stuff, and they haven't done anything with that yet, I would blast that out, as loud as I can, the idea is they're not going to give it to us. We have to force them to do it. And Franco, to your point, and I kind of believe this too, but I think even Obama kind of said this many years ago, is to trust the adults in the room, meaning them, as far as, oh, they will take care of it,
Right.
and us plebes don't have to worry about anything. And what has been shown right now is no, we cannot trust our politicians because they're not going to work in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
If we want something, we have to take it for ourselves. So I think it's a matter of, just continue to form the coalitions that I think, have started, but to kind of create more of a wave where it's like, it cannot be ignored by mainstream media, that they have to address it in a way that our politicians have to be forced to address it, so that hopefully we would have something move as far as being one step closer to this country having Medicare for all.
100%, Colin.
I am all for pressure campaigns. I am all for it. AOC back in 2018, she would have been telling us to do that. AOC back in 2018 would be telling us to cause a ruckus.
Yeah.
Start a fight, protest, make your politicians work for you. I don't know what happened to that AOC, but that was AOC in 2018.
Yeah.
That's what got her elected. That's what made her very popular. So now that we're doing it, some people are shaming us, but this is from the AOC playbook back in 2018, so I have no problem doing it. And as far as what's next, I don't know if you guys heard about this, but there's a Medicare for All strategy conference coming up January 23rd and 24th. You can go to medicareforall.sketch.com, sketch as in schedule, medicareforall.sketch.com. Speakers include Pramila Jayapal, who wrote the House bill for Medicare for All, Jamal Bowman, and Crystal Ball, among other speakers. Tickets are only $50, guys. $50 to discuss Medicare for All.
Get the F out of here.
There's a scholarship program if you're a poor. You can get it for $0. I don't know if they're limited or not. But yeah, I guess the barrier, to talking about Medicare for All is $50.
You got to pay your copay.
Jesus.
Yeah, you can't pay.
So Ricky, Colin, and Jackson, let's keep talking about this. Let's not make this go away. Let's keep collaborating. I'll bring you guys on. We'll go on other shows too, like Nico's or Elite Camps or the Combo Couch, and we'll keep talking about this. Let's not make this go away, and let's also keep doing what we did with the Assange, with Action for Assange, in making this like a collective of more than just one issue. There's a lot of things wrong with this country, and I think that the more we unite with other movements, the closer we get to an actual general strike. Right? There might be more protests going forward about censorship or about like a bunch of other stuff that's going on. Protests against Amazon, we can organize with Chris Smalls. I'm hoping to see more of that going forward, and I will not make that conversation go away. You guys brought up Bring the Ruckus and AOC's own words from 2018. I want to give a shout out to Matt Orfala, who was there as well. It was great meeting him. And shout out to DJ L7, who just donated $2 in Super Chat. There is a funny moment that that happened. It was day 2 when Alf started yelling about MPP, like he felt like he was wrong. I do have a video in my channel that better explains like what happened and how he was wrong. But it was funny how Jackson was like, "Yo, who are you, man? We're protesting forced to vote." And he's like, Alpha's like, "Yeah, that's right, forced to vote." And at first everybody was like looking at Ed like all weird because he was like yelling about MPP. And then when he started yelling about forced to vote, everyone was like, "Yeah, forced to vote." I thought that was really funny. Oh man, Ed, you are crazy, man. But let's now talk about something that happened today that somebody, I think it was Steven Torres who brought it up. And that is AOC and her tweet today. So I'm going to pull that up for everybody right now. Hang on a sec. All right. Let me share my window. Huh?
And you have to look at the tweet that she replied to.
Yep. I have the whole thing.
Good.
All right. So let me zoom in for you guys. Whoops. All right, first I want to give a shout out to this tweet by you, Jackson. You said it's been 8 days since the Fraud Squad and U.S. Progressives Caucus voted for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Since then, an estimated 1,500 Americans have died due to a lack of access to basic health insurance. We can't wait for Medicare for all any longer. Hashtag force to vote. Don't let that die down. Keep hashtagging force to vote until we get it. All right. So here's a tweet that AOC put up today. Let me make sure everybody can see. She said, the 15-minute time is off because the House is voting according to COVID protocols. Normally, we have 15 minutes for all members to run over the floor to vote. Sometimes they leave it open a few minutes longer due to social distancing. Members vote in groups, so votes can take 1 hour. So this is in response to somebody who tweeted out, AOC, can you do a thread on how House voting works and explain why the 15-minute time means nothing? And then Blake Morris replied, and then they said, what is the purpose of a vote like the one tonight where the answer is already known, regardless of the result of the vote? Is it mainly just to get representatives on the record? And then AOC said, a few reasons. Sometimes it's to get members on the record so people can make excuses later. Sometimes these votes create real political pressure that forces developments. Sometimes we vote for the historical record to let future generations know we did everything we could. Oh, sorry, I'm like in the way a little bit here. But man, guys, that sounds really familiar, right? It sounds like she's making the case for force to vote. So Jackson, you had a video that you put up. You got on that quick. So you want to share your thoughts about that? About that tweet?
Yo, you broke up for a second. I didn't really catch that. What was the question?
Oh, you just want to share your thoughts about the tweet that AOC put up. I know you had a video. You like got on that really quick. So what are your thoughts on that? She's making the case for force to vote, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean, she just accidentally defended force to vote and everything that Jimmy Dore and we've all been doing over the past month. You know, there's no other way of spinning what just happened. She went out there and explained beautifully in such a succinct fashion,
yes,
as
very
to
eloquently.
why we should be forcing a vote on Medicare for all.
But Jackson, here's the thing. It was her idea. So because it's her idea, then it's okay.
Okay,
but
yeah, so
Jimmy, she had the issue.
we're also not AOC approved organizers. I forgot about that, even though, you know, I'm sure we all used to be at least like somewhat fans of the squad and like what they were doing. I know I was a huge fan. I donated to them, you know, like, but apparently we're not AOC approved organizers either. So not only are our ideas, you know, worthless, we're also any protest or action we organize can be tossed aside because we're not approved by the squad themselves.
But I think, again, this kind of goes to my point as far as, and it definitely comes off this way as politicians are like, trust us, we're the adults, you guys don't know anything, if not borderline stupid, as far as you don't know anything about government, you don't know how politics works, let us take care of it. And so I just feel that in a way, that's very patronizing to me as far as this is what we pushed for, but because it was based on more than likely because of a jack-off comedian, that, oh no, that's not fine. But now you have the opportunity now, and you have no leverage now. Like, you have no leverage as far as even getting that guarantee, you know, to even have it come on the floor because you didn't make that tangible before. Or if you did, you didn't communicate it with the general public. And I think that's a frustration that people have. It'd be one thing if Jimmy, you know, said force to vote, and then AOC came back with him or even Justin Jackson, like, no, we have a strategy that we've been working on, blah, 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 blah. That would have been one thing. But instead, she made excuse after excuse after excuse as to why she couldn't at that time, which fortunately Jackson just kind of swatted aside, you know. And now they're playing like, oh, we have a strategy, which is basically, you know, what Jimmy was pushing for all this time. So it's just the idea of like, kind of going back to, I think, what Jackson was saying as far as, you know, they ran on this. And back then it was like, the idea was, oh, we have to vote for Nancy Pelosi because there was no one else, you know, to be speaker. Okay. I mean, that was shit, but okay. So why not within the last 2 years created that coalition where you could have had maybe Barbara Lee, or you could even have Ro Khanna, or someone within the Progressive Coalition to challenge her as far as speakership? Why have you not done that? So it's just kind of putting into question, what the fuck have you been doing the last couple of years? Sitting on your ass and indulging yourself in the celebrity now that you have become. And so I think for me, that's kind of where the frustration is that, you know, they're living off the brand of being a progressive / being the fraud squad, the squad, versus actually fighting for the things that we voted for them for. But yeah, I just find that tweet now very condescending, you know, in my view, because this is exactly what Jimmy was ranting and raving about for the last few weeks. Yeah. And you kind of dismissed his idea as, oh, because you're a comedian that, you know, I don't have to listen to you.
I 100% agree with that. It's very frustrating. And not only do they not listen to their constituents, they don't listen to the protests, they don't listen to anything. They tell you what to care about now. Ilhan Omar had a tweet a few days ago. She posted her Ilhan Omar impeachment resolution. And she said, we're up to nearly 60 members. Keep the calls coming. 202-224-3121. Really? That's interesting because we were all calling about force the vote. We were all calling. We all called. Nothing happened. But you want people to call about your impeachment resolution. I find that very interesting.
Well, and here's the thing with that. The reason why they were able to get a House floor vote on a resolution to invoke the 25th Amendment, which I don't know why they were even pushing for that, when today they just, actually while we were on the stream, they just finalized that the House has officially approved new articles of impeachment. They passed that. So I don't know why, you know, they wanted to push for that 25th Amendment thing when they're already doing the impeachment. Just the optics of that seem a bit disorganized, a bit jumbled, but I'm not one to you know, want to like help the Democratic establishment achieve their goals or anything, but just pointing out the obvious. But the thing is that the Democratic establishment, the Democratic elite, said that bringing a House floor vote on the 25th Amendment was like a good thing. So that's why the squad, the progressives, they all united behind it. And it happened as quickly as it did. The Democratic elite doesn't want a House floor vote on Medicare for all. So they're not even going to try to fight. I mean, that's the only thing that you need to look at. If anyone's wondering, like, why is there a vote on this but not a vote on this, when they both have the potential to achieve the supposed goals of the progressives, all you have to do is look at Democratic elite's position on the two respective pieces of legislation, I guess the legislation and the resolution, and see how those differ.
So we have Combo Couch in the live chat. Shout out to you guys. Their on the ground work is amazing. And for people who are just tuning in, we have Jackson Hinkle in the top right, and we have Ricky Rants in the left, and we have Colin in the lower right. But yeah, shout out to them. They were there on the ground. They were doing amazing coverage. Johnny was like running around, showing everything, showing the cops. Jackson, at one point, you gave the cops the finger. That's what's up, man.
Well, okay, no. So the story behind that, I didn't know if anyone was really seeing that because Fiorella was speaking at that moment. But what happened was, and this happens at, you know, if you've been to Black Lives Matter protests, if you've been to like environmental protests, Standing Rock, whatever protest that's like actually advocating for the goals of the left, what happens is and mind you, you didn't see this at the insurrection. What happens is the cops will come out in full force, right? Full force, riot gear. They'll have their guns. There was one cop who had a rifle drawn on us when we had like 40 people on the third day, maybe 40 people on the third day. He had a rifle drawn. And what they do is they start getting out their cameras. They start getting out their drones, and they fly the drone. We didn't have a drone at the DC protest, but like I've had this at plenty of Black Lives Matter protests where they bring out drones and start filming everyone who's in the crowd. You know, the LA, it may have been LA City Council, or it was an LAPD commission, I think. They just yesterday approved a new facial recognition policy for the LA Police Department. So now they can roll out their massive facial recognition system onto innocent Angelenos who are just out protesting. But what they were doing at the protest in DC was there was a few cops who had cameras, and they were actually taking pictures of all the speakers and everyone who was there. So I was like, you know, fuck that. I'm going to throw this dude the finger so he can get a nice photo of that. And I think he did. I think he got a few when I was doing that. It made pretty good photos.
Nice. Yeah. Go ahead, Ricky.
I was just throwing up the deuces to them. The whole
Yeah.
Like,
they were very aggressive with us. And also in BLM protests, like when we were marching in the streets, there was cop cars that drove so fast right next to me and a bunch of other protesters. There were helicopters flying around us. That right there, they do all that just to protect the freaking elite.
Right.
There's one other thing I wanted to say. Oh yeah, Fiorella had a tweet. If you're still in the chat combo couch, there was a tweet. I wasn't able to have it here. Like my stream gets all effed up when I try to use Twitter and the stream, but I saw Fiorella put up a tweet comparing AOC's response when somebody asked about, you know, why she's not doing force to vote, and comparing the response that we just analyzed here. And it was like, what the fuck? Like you're giving like two completely different arguments to achieve, like you could do the same thing for both, and it's not mutually exclusive. Like you can impeach and do force to vote. Not that I think impeachment is worth your time right now. Like the guy's about to step out of office right now. But it shows their priorities. Their priorities is more in like surface level division among people and not really giving us any of the things that we need.
Right. I'm just worried, and I'm hope to God I'm wrong, that this is not going to be the new Russiagate, as far as, especially now Biden is going to be in office next week and have this be the focus of his first 100 days. Like, I hope to God that this is not going to be the mainstream media story du jour, as far as having this impeachment be the focus when we're still in a pandemic. We still have people who need, aid. We still have people who are about to get kicked out of their homes. We still have people who are in food lines right now. And the thing is, like, Joe Biden won because he didn't have to say anything, as far as staying in his basement. Kamala as well, So my fear is that they might use this as a way to keep Joe Biden still kept in the basement, and not have him necessarily do anything constructive over the first 100 days when he's in office. So prove me wrong, but I hope, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah. I mean, they're ramping up on this domestic terrorism thing. Like, what this is like, it's manufacturing consent 101, right? It's what they do to try to get us into war with all these other countries, try to manufacture our consent, like the public's consent, to get into all these wars. Oh, Saddam Hussein is a dictator. Muammar Gaddafi is a dictator. Oh, the kids were taken out of the incubators. It's par for the course in history. And they're doing that here. They're exaggerating what happened. They're like, it's domestic terror. Like, AOC is like making herself out to be like a victim. Like, she just like escaped, like I don't know, drone strikes. Like, they're going to try. And then the Cory Bush's legislation, which was weirdly written like the day before, like on January 5th. I think they had it prepared, because also look at Joe Biden's transition team and the people who are going to be in his administration all have ties to big tech and intelligence. There would be no big tech if there was no CIA, or like they funded that. And so they're ramping up for censorship. They're already targeting the lefty channels. They're just using Donald Trump as a scapegoat and try to use him as the boogeyman to try to manufacture people on the left's consent. What are your guys' takes on that?
I think that, I think that even if you agree, which I do, that I mean, I'm of the belief that maybe impeaching Trump during his last few days in office, I don't know if that's like the best way to use your time when we're in the middle of a pandemic. But if you're actually reading the 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it says that you can impeach someone if they took an oath to office and they either participated in or aided and abetted insurrectionists. Donald Trump did that. There's no getting around that. Donald Trump did that. If you want to say that maybe now's not the right time to push for an impeachment trial, that's fine. Whatever. You're subject to your own opinion. But he did do that. Now, what the scary thing is that now the incoming Biden administration is saying that, like what you just said, they're going to be passing a domestic terror law. They already have like foreign terror laws. Like if anyone is a foreign actor who's, committing acts of violence against civilian populations for political reasons, that they're going to get drawn up on, charges of terrorism. In the United States, we already have plenty of laws against people attacking civilians. In fact, I don't think there's any terrorist act domestically that could be carried out that wouldn't be met with swift action and plenty of charges that we already have on the books relating to laws that have been enshrined into this country's constitution since our inception. It's like you can't just kill someone or attack someone and expect there to not be consequences. So I don't really understand the need to push for a domestic terrorism law other than what is going to happen, right? You have all these corporate actors who are within the Biden administration. You have all the same neocons who are friends with Biden that are going to have their say in this. You have all the same intelligence operatives who are going to have their say in this bill and this policy, and they're going to pass it. Make like no mistake about it. They will pass this law probably within the first 100 days, and it's going to be a massive crackdown on free speech. There's already lefty accounts that are being censored. Red Scare Pod hasn't tweeted in over a year, yet their Twitter account just got taken down. Chapo Trap House, their subreddit got taken down like a year ago. Richard Medhurst got his account demonetized because he was talking about lefty things. So it's already happening. And if you know your history, you know that the only people that they've really ever gone after as domestic terrorists, there's some right-wing extremists that they've gone after at the federal level, pen charges against. But most of the time, when you have like a CIA or an FBI-backed like sting operation into activists, it's people who are on the left. It's people like Black Lives Matter organizers. It's people like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. It's people like those who are protesting at Standing Rock. These are the people who really get hit the hardest by operations like COINTELPRO.
Yeah.
These are the people that they have consistently throughout history defined as domestic terrorists. So I'm extremely scared about what the Biden administration is going to do, especially considering he's the guy who literally almost single-handedly helped the Bush administration pass the Patriot Act.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'll let you guys riff on this too, but I can't imagine your opinions are too different than mine. This is a massive problem that we are looking down the barrel of right now.
Those of you who are like, impeaching Trump, censoring Trump is a good thing. I get that aspect of it, but here's the thing. You could have banned Trump from Twitter years ago. So why is it now for tweets that, and this might be a very unpopular opinion, but the tweets that Twitter claimed were the cause of him, basically being, removed from Twitter did not incite violence to me. And I think that's the very thing. I think that's the thing, as far as social media in general. I think, you could say something and people can interpret it in another way and go do it based on that interpretation. That's anything that I or anyone here wouldn't necessarily sent or the intent. Like, I created that intent, just as far as the insurrection last week, whether Trump, wanted that insurrection to occur, you can't prove that, but, like, certainly there were people within that crowd who had the idea, but I think, again, for me, it's the idea of being consistent. If you're going to do this with Trump, you should do this to every politician in office, because there have been plenty of things that politicians have said in regards to drone strikes, in regards to bombing other countries, and, and especially if they're on a Democrat, the media doesn't bat an eye. But because it's Trump, he's a big boogeyman, they just want a fall guy, they're going to put the blame on him. And ultimately, that's not going to help his base any, because his base see the bullshit. Yeah. So, as Frank and I live in DC, I'm actually going to Atlanta next week because I'm kind of in fear of like what could possibly might pop off, next week during the inauguration. There's still plenty of like insurrectors like now walking around the streets in DC right now still. Like Airbnb basically had to ban like anyone taking any housing for the next week or so out of fear for that. So I don't see how this could make this any better than what I feel is going to be a way much worse situation if they just kind of like, whatever, he's going anyway, let's, whatever, or, like making consistent across the board for every politician.
Yeah.
And we're not going to do that.
Yeah, I agree. First of all, last Wednesday was completely preventable. We know how tight things can get in DC from experience. There was one cop for each of us ready to arrest us when we were protesting healthcare. Very harmless healthcare, right? So Wednesday was preventable. They are playing politics now, and I think that's pretty disingenuous. I think it's pretty disgusting what they're doing now. And guess where Joe Biden is having his inauguration in person next week?
Right.
At the Capitol building.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So they can secure the Capitol building when there's something going on.
Right.
Okay. So this is all politics. This is all theater. And I'm not going to debate that with anyone. That's what this is. All right. As far as impeaching Trump, sure. He's had multiple impeachable offenses, I'm sure. You could have got him out for the emoluments clause or whatever, but that would have actually implicated a lot of Democrats. So that didn't happen, right? Because Democrats would actually be guilty as well. Oopsie. So they're playing this game now. Well, yeah, they're playing this game now, and this is what they've chosen to do. I don't know how to explain this to my liberal friends, but like impeaching Donald Trump isn't going to make the Nazis go away. It's not going to make Trump go away. It's only going to make those people even worse. So if that's what you're trying to do, I guarantee you the impeachment of Donald Trump is the wrong way to go. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and they're going to go to their own corners and get even more mad.
Exactly. We're going to be even more divided. You want to talk about unity? Well, Joe Biden ain't it, all right? Joe Biden's not it.
Ricky, to be fair, Joe Biden did say he wanted to deal with white supremacy. So this is a chance to do it. That's what that means, but he said it. Although, to be fair, I figured it was Black people would have to remind him of the implications of white supremacy. And the insurrectionists last week already did our work. So, but this is what Joe Biden said he was going to deal with. So let's see how he does.
If Biden wants to deal with white supremacy, he should make a time machine and go back to 1994.
Yeah, stop himself from writing that crime bill. Shout out to Seaman Stains. She said, my hat is on backwards. Yes, it is. What the name? Seaman Stains.
You guys and your names, man.
I know. So I do want to say something about this. It's like the language that they're saying that Trump used to quote unquote incite violence is, he said like something like fight like hell, or like they're gonna fight like hell. That can easily be used against leftist movements when we say, let's fight like hell for Medicare for all. Let's fight like hell for forced to vote. Let's fight like hell to defund the police. Easily be used against us.
Or AOC.
Yeah.
Ruckus.
And then,
So,
well, just one more thing. Like, I was in an argument with one of my friends. He was saying, like, what part of, like, it's the president that's inciting violence and he has, like, a lot of influence. Do you not understand? And I said, well, look at Bernie Sanders. What if he became the president? Or him as just like a campaigner when he was running for president. Let's fight for a revolution. You don't think that's threatening? They're going to use that against him. They can use that against leftist movements so easily. And that's what they're hoping for. They're just using Trump and what happened on January 6th as a gateway to take away our civil liberties. And again, let's remind people, Joe Biden is the author of the Patriot Act, and he bragged about it.
well, no, that's the thing. Like, they did do that with Bernie. Like, the mainstream media smeared him to high heaven, you know, like, and people are like, we don't want a revolution. We don't need one. Well, you know, so they already have done it. So,
Yeah. And
it's like against people that they don't like, who are kind of anti-establishment, that they do that to.
Chris Matthews, I think it was. He was that old guy on MSNBC, right? If it's not him, I apologize, but it was one of the MSNBC chuds. They came out and compared Bernie Sanders' victory in Iowa and New Hampshire to the Nazi invasion of France, even though he's an old Jewish man. And he said, I think it was Chris Matthews. He got fired after it.
Yeah, it was.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, that's who it was. He's like, you know, what we saw last night is comparable to when the armed forces of the Nazis invaded France. And I was just like, what?
Did you hear when Chuck Schumer compared it to Pearl Harbor and that it's going to be a date we'll always remember?
Oh, God.
Yeah, that was crazy too.
So Convocat said both sides need to stop framing each other as domestic terrorists and instead understand why people on both sides are pissed. Yeah, we share a common enemy. Like, we need to remind people. There was so many people on my Facebook that were using the same arguments that the conservatives would use against Black Lives Matter protesters. Like, they're like, oh, those people are traitors for going there to the Capitol. They're being violent. They're destroying property. Like, that's what you were defending Black Lives Matters protesters for destroying property. Like, we need to understand that we share a common enemy. It's the elite. Like, we are all oppressed, and they keep us confused. They tell us lies. From the moment we're born, we're told lies. And that's on purpose because they want us to be divided so that the status quo remains as the status quo and they can keep enriching themselves as we remain as fools fighting and they're eating popcorn in their rich mansions.
I'm going to push back on that one a little bit. I think the fact that we had a bunch of, insurrectionists going to the Capitol on a mission that was essentially inspired by lies from people within the Trump campaign and by Trump himself isn't something that should necessarily be tolerated at all, I don't think. What I tweeted out the day it was happening, first of all, I was just so depressed I didn't even want to cover what was happening because I was like, this is just terrible what's happening. Not because of what was happening, right? People all across this country are in pain, they're suffering, and I think we all understand that. There's plenty of people who are suffering, who are being brutalized and harassed due to the system right now. But the thing is, you have to recognize why it was happening. Black Lives Matter protesters out in the street because they're trying to get like equal rights for people who are being systemically oppressed by this brutal system and also just literally murdered in the streets by police. These people were going to the Capitol to protest against election results that have been challenged dozens of times, and virtually every time, with the exception of a few cases in which actual Trump supporters were found to have committed election fraud, there was no election fraud to be found. So I push back on that because I think it's very dangerous to compare what they were doing to what Black Lives Matter supporters and protesters are doing, essentially. And I think their outrage was not justified, is what I'm trying to say. I think Black Lives Matter supporters, their outrage was justified. I think environmental protesters, Standing Rock people, climate change activists, their outrage is justified. I cannot say the same for the insurrectionists that stormed the Capitol.
Let me push back a little bit,
I would push back.
Jackson. We do have a history of election integrity problems in our country. Because our elections are not transparent is the problem to begin with. Like, if we knew for sure that Trump won, like without a doubt, I don't think that would have happened. And there was also a lot of people there for different reasons. Like, there were people like there that were mad about a bunch of other stuff. Like, some people were there because of like the stimulus. From what I hear from people who are on the ground. But yeah, like we do have election problems, and if our elections were transparent enough, I don't think that would have happened. And that's part of what, keeps our population divided and confused.
I think Trump's superpower is manipulating the system, that the trouble that's already existed within our current system, for his benefit. And I think, and the commonality, and again, like I've gone into, different arguments with this with people over the last couple of days. Like, you can see a commonality between Black Lives Matter, even with this, is just dissatisfaction within our government and just what it represents and the implications of what our government is doing in light of, in the lives of daily people. Not to say I condone anything that happened, at the insurrection. But also, and those of you who follow me on Twitter know this because I went on a mega rant on this, last week. When I applied for the permit, the police officer that I spoke to basically said to me, that whole area around the Capitol was closed. We can only have about 50 people at our protest. We were basically only able to, stay at the park where we were kind of based on. But, it's DC, you can do a protest if you kind of walk on the sidewalk and keep walking, which we were doing, and yet we were all were being very close to being arrested all 3 days. And they brought how many cops?
Yeah.
They just let those people in.
Enough cops for one person, at our protest. And yet, the cops allowed carte blanche to these insurrectionists to basically allow access into the Capitol, without any problem. So I think, though, it's just the idea of this frustration with government overall, and how people feel that they're not being listened to in light of government. And I think that's a commonality, whether you are progressive, liberal, conservative, or somewhere in the middle there, that I think we all have. And that's not an issue. And I think Trump was very good in kind of manipulating that to make people feel like, oh, he understands me. He gets me. He's going to fight for me. And so while I don't condone what happened, I do kind of understand it to a degree.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I understand it too, even though I don't agree with the reasons for why a lot of people were there. A lot of people were just they were misled. And I personally wouldn't ever give my life for a politician.
Right.
And Combo Couch says, guys, do you understand the process and structure of how our elections are run? Bill Binney and Scott Ritter agree with me. They were bad and deserve a real audit. We didn't get one. Yeah, for more election integrity issues, Combo Couch does a great job breaking things down. Again, I understand the reasons for why they were there. I personally wouldn't have been in there storming the Capitol, but I do wish it was us in an organized manner protesting for actual policies like forced to vote like defunding the police, like a whole list of different policies. I wish that we could have organized there, but it appears like they let people in. They were not aggressive against those protesters. They would have been aggressive against us though. And they're going to use that excuse like, oh, these are domestic terrorists. Like we need to take more precaution next time. Right. I think that they're going to ramp it up and be more aggressive on us going forward. What do you guys think?
No, I definitely agree. And I think, but here's the thing though, like, what if forced to vote, like even with our protests, if we had enough planning, you know, like, I'm fairly sure that many of those guys, not all of them, but I'm sure many of them who were at the insurrection would consider coming. Because, I mean, they need healthcare too. You know, I'm sure many of them have issues too. And so I think, again, this kind of goes along to what I'm saying is the stories that we have, you know, just as far as, you know, our issues need to be elevated, you know, to the world of the politician who essentially lives in the DC, and I can't even call it the DC bubble because it's within them, it's just kind of like the capital bubble as far as, you know, not being aware of the true issues that are, you know, surrounding people every single day. And I think, you know, like, and you're right, Frank, I do believe that they're kind of using like, and you see this with politicians all the time, you know, like they're always kind of blaming each other. And for the rest of us, we kind of view it as a team sport. Like, I'm for my team and this other team sucks. I'm for the Republicans and the Democrats suck. It's always like pointing fingers at one another. And I think this is my frustration with the squad, going back to that, is now they kind of co-opted the language of, oh, it's the Republicans' fault that this doesn't happen. No, what about your own leadership who, AOC, you kind of called out initially and have called out Nancy Pelosi, you know, on the issue, her issues as far as speaker, and you're mute when it comes to calling her out now. So I think it's just the idea of, you know, if we're able to kind of come together to kind of think about like, what are the issues that we all have a stake in, and finding common ground in those things, it would be better for the country, I think, overall. But I think you're right. I think that's a lot of this pointing, you know, politically is on purpose to kind of distract us from, you know, fighting for real issues that I think are more pertinent versus like an impeachment issue that really should not have as much attention as it is. But again, as I said, I fear it's going to, because it's just a perfect distraction from what people need right now.
I agree. It's interesting because I've been finding more common ground with right-wingers than I have with my liberal friends lately, because at the very least, even though we don't agree on messaging at all, at least right-wingers can identify that there's a major, major problem with our government. They may not be able to articulate what they're feeling, and they may do some crazy things like last Wednesday, which was crazy and chaotic. But at least they understand that something is not right. That's why they went with a populist candidate with different rhetoric, even though I don't like the rhetoric, but they know something's wrong. You know, the apolitical, the people that aren't really involved in politics, they know something's wrong. That's why they don't participate, right? The politically homeless don't know where to go because they know something's wrong. The left knows something's wrong. And I can't, the people that are supposed to be my allies, I would think, are my liberal friends, because I live in a very liberal area, and I can't get through to them. They think that I'm a crazy extremist. They think incrementalism is the way to go. And we've seen over and over and over that incrementalism is a failure, especially when things move so fast now. When the military wants a $740 billion budget, they get it like that. And when we're pushing for, you know, universal health care for 75 years, we're still getting nothing.
It's more like, how do we pay for it?
So I feel like we thought we had a disagreement, but we agree on a lot of what, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you guys just said.
Yeah.
I do think there's election integrity issues. I think paper ballots are an incredible way to amend a lot of the election integrity issues that we see, and Tulsi Gabbard's been a huge proponent of that. She's been met with like no support from virtually anyone else, which sucks. But I think there's that. I think ranked choice vote. I honestly think that our elections, even if they had paper ballots, are like destined for failure and for, you know, an inherent lack of democratic representation from the get-go, even if we had paper ballots, because we don't have ranked choice voting in this country. Both parties are controlled by the same people. It's an oligarchy. I don't think any of us disagree on that. The only thing that my frustration is these people, and Colin, I hear you, like a lot of it was, you know, facilitated by the Capitol Police, who let these protesters in the Capitol open up the barricades and let them in. Also, Trump denied any requests for the National Guard to come and protect the Capitol, which I think was only the request was only like approved like 3 hours in after the insurrection started. And I'm hearing now that like Mike Pence may have been the one to approve that request. So there's tons of problems with election integrity. Some of the people at fault here are not just the protesters. It's obviously, I think the police are definitely at fault in a massive way. And I think the Trump administration is also at fault in a massive way. But the thing is, we've had so many challenges in courts about election fraud, which is a different thing from systemic election integrity. And those challenges have all either been thrown out because there was no grounds to hear them, or they've been heard. And when the case was presented, there was nothing to substantiate the claims, right? That's what I see the difference in the argument between election fraud and election integrity. I think you can be fed up with election integrity and the lack thereof in this country, but to go and try and storm the Capitol, and I'm not saying everyone there did that. The Convo Couch was interviewing plenty of people who were just there protesting peacefully, and also shared many of the same concerns that I think we share about this country and about the oligarchy that runs this country. So I think that, you know, there's plenty of normal people that were there, but there's no way in hell that I'm ever going to like feel any sort of like, I guess, compassion for the people who were in there. The only compassion I feel are for the people who were brutalized and killed thanks to Donald Trump touting these false claims of election fraud. Like, I feel bad for them. I feel bad for the cops who died, because this was Trump going out there and continuing to leverage these false notions about election fraud. And he promoted this and allowed them to essentially go do that. And cops killed innocent protesters, and protesters, you know, literally killed cops. And that, I mean, there's just nothing that can be said from my point of view, which would, I guess, condone what took place, is what I'm trying to say.
No, I think we can all agree none of us condone what happened. And, you know, like, just as far as the severity of what happened, I think we all agree that it was basically the perfect storm of chaos. But for me, and I'll say this just kind of personally as a Black man who, not to say I've dealt with white supremacy like overtly, you know, given, you know, my, you know, just my upbringing, but I definitely have been educated to kind of be aware of it. And so for me, you know, like, a couple of people have been like, you should be more surprised. And I'm like, no, because essentially I've been trained and educated to believe that this is part of our history, essentially, as Black people in America, or basically in the West, you know. And for me, it's kind of like, when it was, not to say I was expecting this to happen, but in a way I was, you know. And given like the vitriol, you know, like, first of all, we haven't dealt with white supremacy properly, you know, at all, you know, in this country. You know, we've just kind of brushed it under the rug, you know, and just kind of denied. And just even talking with some people over the weekend, people are still basically like, oh, we fought the Civil War and like Black people have more rights now and everything's okay. And I'm just kind of like, really, you know? But, you know, there was a reason why I hated my high school. But I think it's like the idea of, and I think Trump was good in kind of exposing ugly that has been that is America. Like Joe Biden made a comment like, our country is better than this. We are not this. No, you are this. You've just denied it and avoided that issue, and you have the privilege to do so as a white man, But I think most people, and I think who've been reading the tea leaves, I'm not surprised that happened. It was just a question of when and how it was going to happen. But it doesn't take away the idea for me that what happened, was like the fact that I basically was trying to run home last week because I was at work, having to try and run home before everything closed down, before curfew was like, yeah, that was scary enough. And as I said, I'm planning to be out of town next week because I don't want to be here in case something else happens, and I think that's something we all have to be mindful of, is that this will happen again if we're not careful, and not necessarily in DC. There's going to be I'm sure there's going to be more of these things kind of popping up everywhere from now on. So I think, again, just going to what's saying to Trump, they're only poking the bear as far as, impeachment. So, because I just feel like it's just going to get a whole lot worse, that people are going to feel like, oh, Trump is, they're going against Trump, my hero, my savior, whatever. And we were fortunate that there were not as many lives who were killed, at this insurrection. There will be more if we're not dealing with this properly. So.
Yeah, and I'm worried about Inauguration Day. And also, I've read a couple of reports that in articles written by Whitney Webb recently, and also from other members from the Last American Vagabond, like Ryan Christian and Derek Rose, where they talk about how there's been simulations that have been run by our government like a year and a half or 2 years before the election about chaos that would happen post-election, and about how there's going to be domestic terrorism and how they're going to deal with it via censorship and more surveillance. And also with I don't know if you guys have heard of Event 201, but it was a simulation that was funded and sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Johns Hopkins, Johnson & Johnson. And in that simulation, they were dealing with a coronavirus called H1N1. And they were talking about how they're going to, I'm not saying whether it's the virus is manufactured or not or anything. I'm just saying it's strange how a lot of the stuff that they talked about in that event 201, came to pass a year later. That event took place in October 2019, and they were talking about how they were going to censor people and channels that go against the mainstream media narrative about the virus and who are going against the narrative about the vaccine. How they're going to use sources that people trust, like Wikipedia or AP or Google, to try to gain the trust of the public, and so that they can see the information that they want the people to know. They didn't say the objective information, but the information that they want the public to know. So is there something deeper going on? I can't officially prove anything, but it's something to be very cautious about. And as far as the election integrity stuff, the what's his name, Giuliani, and the other all the Republicans, they were presenting the worst evidence possible about it. They were talking about the ghost of Hugo Chavez hacking the election. they used really bad evidence there. But yeah. I'd recommend people check out Convo Couch and the evidence that they present. I can't personally say that the election was stolen. It's possible that there was election fraud and then Trump still could have lost. I don't personally know. And I think that's the problem for a lot of people, is that we don't officially know because our elections are not transparent enough. Are there any final things you guys want to say about Everything we talked about, from censorship to forced to vote.
Just one thing. I think, yeah, just more props to you, Jackson, and Franco, just as far as, just speaking truth. And I think, I think we're definitely in, and to be kind of hopeful, because I am very much a pessimistic by nature. Jackson kind of knows this about me by now. But I think what makes me hopeful, and I'm an older millennial, is kind of seeing, now this wave of people who are more critical as far as our world around us and our government, and are willing to do something about it. So that being said, I want to give props to you, Jackson and Franco, just, I think, for your channels as far as what you're trying to do, for us, as far as giving us the truth. But I think the extra step is, what practical steps can we do as far as trying to change, our consciousness, essentially? I think, again, for the last few years, there's just been a lot of talking, and that's fine, but talking without action is meaningless. So
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate that there seems to be now a new wave of media who are not just talkers, but are actually doers. And so I definitely appreciate both of you for what you're doing as far as having people aware of the reality that does exist in government and just in our world overall. But I think are giving people like me, who are dying to do something kind of more constructive and productive as far as bringing that, change that we desire to see, that there are people who are willing to take the steps to do that. So just want to thank you guys for everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Colin, Jackson, and Ricky.
Yeah, I'll add one last thing here, and thank you for the kind words. I just commented something in the live chat. If you guys just copy and paste that, if you're looking for talking points as to why people should be opposed to the domestic terrorism plan that Joe Biden's going to be rolling out, it's very likely that his plan is going to be similar to the one that was introduced in 2019. So that I just linked, copy and pasted. Essentially, you can look it up. That's the ACLU's statement on opposing the threat of Domestic Terrorism Act. Read it, because it is very powerful, and I think they make a very strong case for something that might, on the surface, especially if you have you have kind of apolitical friends that might not know what Biden is pushing here. It might sound like a okay thing to introduce a law against domestic terrorism, but there's a lot of meat under that title, and there's a bunch of reasons as to why we should be opposed to it. So go check that out if you haven't already. It's a really good explainer, and thank you for having us on your show, and thank you to everyone who tuned in.
Ricky?
I'll just add, stay consistent, people. Stay consistent out there. If you're rooting for the impeachment of Donald Trump, which, fair, you can, look at Joe Biden the same way. Look at Joe Biden the exact same way.
Yeah.
1998, Joe Biden was pushing the WMDs lie. He was the one saying that there were WMDs in Iraq way before George Bush, and people don't know this. But Joe Biden was the guy out there lying, and that lie is what killed millions of people, and it displaced millions of people all over the world. So if you're going to be critical of Donald Trump, and you're allowed to be, you got to be critical with everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the politicians that and Richard Medhurst was bringing up this point, and also Jordan of the Yellow Brick Road, shout out to him. They were saying, you be consistent, because what about all these politicians that want to get in all these regime change wars and then tell all these lies and give reasons for why we should go? They're calling all these leaders that were democratically elected dictators, and they're not taking off they're not taking off of social media. And what about all the other people that are complicit and allow them to say it, like Bernie Sanders? And sometimes Bernie Sanders gives these talking points too. Why aren't we consistent there? And why aren't we consistent also let's go even further, like the media, like the mainstream media that repeats these lies. And then also like the people on YouTube, the media there, like the Young Turks, like those people that repeat their lies. And then the people that don't criticize them enough. Like, oh, we weren't critical enough of those people. Like, shouldn't we be held accountable too? And it's just like, it's hard to say like what is actually like inciting violence and all that. Like, but yeah, like Ricky was saying, and like how Richard Medhurst and I think Jackson and Colin were also saying, be consistent about this. Okay, these other politicians are warmongers. They've been warmongers for years, some of them decades. And some of them are walking around free in their freaking mansions, like Madeleine Albright, Henry Kissinger. But yeah, I'm so happy I had to have you guys on here. I'm so happy I met you guys in person. It's awesome also that I got to like give you guys a ride too, and we had like great conversations in there. I love how we got all hyped at one point because we thought that Cory Bush actually withheld her vote, but then later we found out that she probably wasn't there or whatever, and then we were like, oh man, oh well. That it was still awesome meeting you guys, eating with you guys. Like I loved seeing you guys in person. I hope to do that again. I hope to collaborate with you guys some more.
Definitely.
Yeah. Again, congratulations, Jackson, for your channel. Go ahead and subscribe to Jackson Hinkle if you have not yet subscribed to him. It's The Dive with Jackson Hinkle. I think, Colin, you're having a YouTube channel soon too, and Ricky as well.
Not anytime soon, but soon-ish, whatever that means.
Hey man, we need as many truth tellers as we can. And I love you guys, and I love my audience members. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and don't forget to stay informed.